Welcome to Sunshine Art and Drawing. Today I'm going to be painting with some soy sauce, just to see what it's like. I thought it'd be a bit of a fun experiment. So the first thing you probably want to get is 2 paper cups that you can throw away. Put straight soy sauce in one, and then put half and half soy sauce and water in the other, and then just start to draw a design. Today I decided to draw a Japanese sailing ship, kind of going with the soy sauce sort of theme, and I think they call it like a junk ship or a junket, with the cool fan type sails. Now I'm using a watercolour pencil because I thought that would be the best thing to line with. But it turned out it wasn't dark enough in the end, so I ended up using a permanent marker over the top. I didn't think like an ink marker would work because of the salt content kind of messes with ink. But once you've got your design down pat, you want to take a wash brush and just use that very, very watered down half and half. Just do a quick wash over the areas that are kind of like the sky and the sea, the large areas. And I added a little bit more soy sauce to the half and half because it wasn't quite as dark as I wanted. Didn't really help at all. It's about the same colour. I ended up just layering it with a bit of just straight soy sauce, and I found if you just sort of angle it, you can just get a little bit on the tip of the brush, and that's perfect just to add a bit more darkness to the sea. I had to make sure that was nice and dark. And once I've done that, I take a small detail brush and just the straight soy sauce and begin to just do all the details. Now the interesting part about this is the darkest you can probably get this is a dark brown. Once you layer over a certain amount of times, the paper just gets too wet, and then it won't get any darker. So I was hoping if I did a layer and then did watercolour over the top of that layer, that I could try and get it darker, but it didn't entirely work. And you can kind of just go with straight soy sauce to begin with, and then use the half and half mix, soy sauce and water, to sort of blend it out to make that kind of gradient that I did with that first sail. And here I'm just doing the sort of where the sails kind of have the fins, so they're light in the centre and then they kind of buckle inwards towards the spines that hold them out like that. And I've sped this up just because I'd spent about an hour doing this, and I didn't think you wanted to watch an hour's worth of footage. But as you're doing this, a couple of things I recommend is, one, you want to wait for a section to dry before you try and paint near it, otherwise it will run. You see that happen a couple of times. I wasn't too bothered about it, it was just really an experiment, so I just kind of wanted to go with the flow, see what happened. And I'm just trying to also make sure that I keep the shadowed parts dark. I have a photo that I'm going off of for reference, just to make sure the sails are correct, and I wanted to make sure that the way the sails bend is kind of shown in the way that I am adding sort of the lighter colour first, and then just going around it in the darker colour to show that it kind of goes in and then out and then in. And after I've done the sails, I kind of add a bit more shadow to try and get it darker, but as you can see at the bottom, it just gets wetter and it doesn't really get any darker. The straight soy sauce is just not going to get any darker than that. So just add in all the rest of the details, and I'm just adding in the boat part and just touching up any of the areas where it wasn't quite blending. And I just wanted to add some detail to the sea at the bottom. And the interesting part I found is, because I did the wash first and then I added the detail after, I went up to do the clouds, and if you're watching the details that I drew at the bottom, they just spread out and then disappear. It was really strange. So I did this with straight soy sauce for the clouds, and I wanted to make it almost look stormy and windy, and that was my thought of the kind of idea of it, because I only have the one colour to work with. So I tried to do some more of these swirls to see if the same thing happened, but I kind of let it dry, and I did a few speckles just to see, sort of experiment what happens when you do that, but the same thing happened. They all just kind of blend into the wash. I was also just trying to tip it, because in clouds, especially storm clouds, the darkest part of the cloud is at the bottom of the cloud. So if you kind of tip it ever so slightly up, you can get the soy to sort of stay towards the bottom of the cloud, making it a bit darker. And here I'm just blotting up any excess with a bit of paper towel, because it was very, very wet. And at this point I'm just clearing off, and I'm just going to get my hairdryer, because I didn't want to spend too much time working on this. So that's why I'm kind of disappearing for a moment. And once I've got my hairdryer all plugged in and working, I'm just going to start to dry this off and try and get as much of that first layer sort of dry as possible so that I could come back in with the watercolour pencil and darken it up. But as you can see, the watercolour pencil just doesn't get dark over the top of the soy sauce. I think it's something to do with the salt. It's just very light and very grey, even though I'm using a black pencil. So I'm just trying to add in more shading around the bottom of the sails and that sort of thing. And then I thought maybe if I added some soy sauce over the top of that, it would blend, but that also didn't happen. So here's me trying to blend it. That didn't also work. But then an interesting thing happened. When you add water the second go over, and you will start to see this in a moment, the water kind of pushes the soy sauce out and causes these interesting little edges, and I think it's the salt content that's doing that. So I sort of went with it and kind of thought, why not? Let's just go with that weird strange design that it's creating. So I kind of just patched water and the very sort of weak half and half mix and used that to kind of create this design. And I kind of like it on the sails, how it made a very specific white center and then it kind of spread out to a brown. And here I'm just trying to tip it around just to make sure it's sort of a bit more even and the water is sort of traveling across. And I'm just drying it again. I brought the hairdryer kind of high up, and that's because it was still really wet, and as you can see you can push the water around. I'm just going to push it off the sides just to get rid of the excess water and dry it off a bit. Once you've got it dry to the point where you can actually pick it up, put it to the side and clean off your table. Soy sauce will stain, so you want to make sure you get that really clean and dry, and then you can bring it back in. And I tried to dry it some more because the back was a little bit wet, so I kept trying to dry it. It got really wet. It is watercolour paper, it's just some Derwent student grade watercolour paper that I thought I'd practice with. I'm really enjoying working in a large size A3, so it did come out quite large. And this is just an Artline permanent texture, and I'm just going to go right around the edges with this and sort of bold out these lines. And I went over the line a little bit there, so I had to thicken up the line, and I saw that and I went, that looks really good, and I ended up just thickening up a lot of the lines. I think adding the thick and the thin lines turns out really well, so I sort of added some outline and a lot thicker to make the sails stand out, because that was probably my favourite part. And once I've finished that and I've gotten the lines nice and thick, I grabbed like a thin Sharpie. I've got the masts. I'm just trying to go from the photo reference of where they are. I didn't want to draw in all of the ropes because I thought that would take way too long. So I just did sort of indications of where ropes would be, I guess. And then also the little wrinkles in the fabric of the sails, I did that all through, and then a bit of design for the wood of the ship itself. And once I completed that, I signed it and just added a little bit of sort of swirls in the water to make it look a bit more stormy, and added some sort of cross hatching to add some more to that shading, and that looks a lot better because it's a lot darker now. And I just kept adding sort of a bit thicker cross hatching all where I thought the shadow should be on the inside of the ship, and then finished off the wood, did a bit of a shadow for the masts, and then the swirls of the sea. And I'm just going to slow the footage down a little bit, just because I'm going to bring it in for a bit of a close-up so you can see some of the design and see some of the kind of how the soy sauce sort of reacted with the water on that second wash. I found one thing, I was just using a regular fine tip Sharpie and it kept catching on the paper, which is why it looks like I'm taking forever to do these swirls, because I had to keep sort of stopping and starting to stop the Sharpie from catching on the paper. I think a couple more little swirls for detail. And once I finish that, I'm just going to zoom the camera in just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. My camera can take a little while to realise that I'm zooming. And I'm just going to bring it in for a bit of a close-up. I popped the focus on so it should autofocus so you can see some of the details. And then you can see the sails and the masts and the ropes. and the cross-hatching and a little bit of the sea there and the clouds to the sides. And I really hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching. Have a sunshiny day.